The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when the private airstrip began to stir awake. Mechanics rolled toolkits across the tarmac, ground crew checked fuel lines, and the faint hum of early morning flights vibrated through the air like a heartbeat. But none of that activity drew as much attention as the moment she stepped out of the terminal building, calm, composed, and wrapped in a perfectly tailored pink pilot uniform that instantly stood out against the gray runway. Her name, at least the one people knew, was Captain Amy, but to the crew who had flown with her, she was simply the pink pilot, not because of the color she wore, but because of the unique warmth and unshakable confidence she carried into every mission, every cockpit, every sky she touched. This morning, as she walked toward the sleek white jet waiting for her, her jacket rested neatly across her shoulders. The soft breeze lifted the ends of her hair, and a natural smile brightened her face, not the forced kind pilots sometimes wore for official introductions, but the kind that came from knowing exactly who she was and what she had earned. The crew working the runway paused, some pretending to check their clipboards a little too slowly, others stopping outright. There was a quiet admiration in their eyes, mixed with the curiosity that always followed her. After all, pilots were respected, senior pilots were admired, but a female pilot who held a captain's rank carried herself with grace and commanded an aircraft like she was born in the cockpit. That was something people didn't see every day. One of the younger ground crew members nudged his friend. "Yar is Kai uniform deco, pink, captain rank, kon haye." His friend whispered back, "Jis terra chal rohai, lag to high coffee upar tak experience rak di high." They weren't wrong. Amy walked with a rhythm, not rushed, not heavy, just steady, like someone who had spent years navigating storms far worse than weather reports could warn her about. Her boots clicked softly across the concrete in a beat so composed it seemed to set the pace for the morning shift. Even the jet behind her looked like it was waiting patiently for her arrival. The aircraft, a sleek twin, engine beauty polished to a mirror shine, almost blended into the background compared to her. The sunlight reflected off its white fuselage, but it was the pink lining of her coat that caught and reflected the morning light, giving her an almost cinematic glow. She paused halfway to the jet and breathed in the crisp breeze. Flying wasn't just a job for her. It wasn't even just a passion. It was a promise she had made to herself long ago, back when no one believed she would pass the exams, when people whispered behind her back, when instructors told her that aviation was too demanding, too unpredictable. Too unsuitable for someone like her. She had proved every one of them wrong, but she didn't walk with arrogance. She walked with quiet victory. A senior engineer approached her respectfully. "Good morning, Captain." Her smile widened just enough to show recognition. "Morning, pre-flight checks completed." "Yes, ma'am, she's ready when you are." Amy nodded. "Perfect, thank you." Her voice carried the calm stability of someone who never rushed perfection. She placed her jacket properly on her shoulders, letting it sit elegantly like a cape. For a moment, she stood facing the jet, taking it in, as if greeting an old friend. To her, aircraft weren't just machines. They were partners. Silent companions who trusted her hands, her judgment, her instincts. Behind her, more crew walked by, their glances lingering longer than they should, not because she sought attention, but because her presence demanded it without trying. She didn't dress in pink for style or for show. She did it because she wanted young girls watching from afar to know that femininity and strength didn't cancel each other out. She could be precise and powerful, and she could be soft and graceful. The world had told her she couldn't be both. She had simply ignored them. As she reached the aircraft's entry stairs, she placed her hand on the rail and looked back at the runway. The wind picked up gently, sweeping her coat behind her like a banner. The rising sun illuminated her features, giving her a glow almost too perfect for the ordinary world. This was her domain, her morning ritual, her sky, and even before the day truly began, something in the air hinted that today something extraordinary was about to happen. The moment Captain Amy stepped onto the runway, wrapped in her pastel pink flight jacket and radiating the same calm confidence she carried into every cockpit, the crew around her felt the shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't unusual for pilots to draw attention. They were the heroes of the skies after all. But the kind of attention she drew was different. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forced. It was quiet, powerful, and impossible to ignore. A few meters away, two new interns stood frozen in place, holding clipboards that were now completely forgotten. They had arrived just 3 days ago and had heard the name Captain Amy thrown around with a strange mix of respect and admiration. But seeing her in person, the pink uniform, the captain's stripes, the bright yet commanding smile, was something they weren't prepared for. "Yea, Captain Amy High," one whispered, his voice cracking slightly. The other nodded without looking away. "Han, and trust me, yea normal pilot Nohai. Main Suna High senior pilots by in sea guidance, lead Hain." Their eyes stayed fixed on her as she walked toward the aircraft. She wasn't rushing, she wasn't dragging her feet. She had a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, measured, controlled, and strong. It was the kind of walk that told you she knew exactly where she was going and why. Nearby, an older mechanic wiped his hands on a cloth and watched her with a smile. Unlike the interns, he had seen her journey from the start. The first day she toured the hangar, the nights she stayed late practicing flight systems, the mornings she arrived before everyone else. He remembered how many people doubted she would make it this far. He remembered the rude whispers, the dismissive smirks, the sarcastic jokes, but he also remembered the fire in her eyes. He nudged his colleague. "Deka, main kaha thana, ek dinye sab ko pitch ch hor digi," his friend chuckled. "Aj wo, hai din lag roha." Amy walked past them with a slight nod, acknowledging their presence without breaking her calm stride. Respect, she believed, wasn't demanded, it was earned, one action at a time, and she had earned hers with years of discipline, sleepless nights, and an unbreakable love for the sky. As she approached the aircraft, the co-pilot for today's flight, Lieutenant Rishi, stood waiting. He was experienced, skilled, and well respected, but even he straightened his posture when she neared. "Good morning, Captain," he greeted, a hint of pride in his voice. "Good morning, Rishi," she replied warmly. "Everything set." "Yes, ma'am. Pre-flight done. Weather reports checked. Minor crosswinds. Nothing you can't handle." Amy raised an eyebrow playfully. "Nothing we can't handle." He laughed softly, reminded once again that flying with her didn't feel like a hierarchy. It felt like teamwork. Behind them, a group of junior flight attendants whispered excitedly, "Yar, pink uniform, kitna elegant lag roja." One said, eyes wide, "Surf elegant nahai." Another corrected, "Powerful, A's lag, to high G's runway by Usco respect to Tahoe." They watched as Amy reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out her aviator sunglasses, and placed them gently on her face. The morning sun reflected off the lenses, giving her an air of mystery that only deepened the impact of her presence. A sudden gust of wind swept across the runway, lifting her jacket behind her like a cape. For a moment, the entire scene looked like a poster for an aviation film, dramatic, inspiring, almost unreal. The ground controller, who usually kept a stern, no-nonsense expression, lowered his headset mic and murmured, "Yea, ladki, a lag high league kai high." When Amy climbed the stairs to the aircraft, she paused for a second. Not for the cameras, there were none, not for attention. She didn't need it. She paused because every time she stepped into a jet, she felt a silent gratitude for the sky, for the journey, for every obstacle she had turned into a stepping stone. Inside the cabin, two young passengers, children of a VIP client, peeked curiously as she walked in. Their eyes widened when they saw her uniform. "Are you the pilot?" the little girl asked shyly. Amy crouched down to her level and smiled. "Yes, and one day, if you want, you can fly too." The little girl's face lit up as if someone had switched on a bulb inside her. From behind, the girl's mother whispered to her husband, "She's extraordinary. You can just feel it." Once Amy entered the cockpit, she placed her hat on the dash, slid into the captain's seat, and took a slow, steady breath. Outside, the crew gathered for final checks, but their eyes kept drifting toward the cockpit where she sat, ready, composed, and undeniably inspiring. Everyone had noticed her, but none of them yet knew the real reason today would test everything she had ever learned. The aircraft was ready, the crew was prepared, and the passengers were comfortably settled in. But before the engines roared to life, Captain Amy had one last stop to make. The hangar. It wasn't part of the checklist. It wasn't a requirement. It was something she did quietly every time, without anyone's instruction. A ritual that grounded her before she touched the sky. She stepped off the aircraft temporarily, her pink coat trailing behind her like a gentle wave as she crossed the sunlit runway. The hangar stood like a giant steel cathedral, its massive doors open wide as if welcoming her inside. Even from a distance, it looked imposing. Rows of aircraft parts, tools, equipment, and bustling engineers working like the arteries of a giant mechanical heart. As she entered, a cool breeze greeted her, air conditioning mixed with the faint smell of oil, metal, and jet fuel. To most people, that smell meant mechanical work. To her, it smelled like dreams, effort, persistence, the smell of a life shaped by determination. A group of engineers looked up the moment she stepped in. "Captain Amy, good morning, ma'am. Pink uniform again. Lagto High runway co-oj by Charm Milne Walla High." Amy laughed softly and nodded at each of them. "Good morning, everyone. Just doing a quick check." The chief engineer, an older man with graying hair and years of wisdom etched into the lines of his face, walked toward her with a respectful smile. "Everything all right, Captain?" "Yes, sir. Just wanted to take a look at the maintenance log myself." "Of course, you're the only pilot who still personally checks logs," he said, shaking his head with a fond sigh. "It keeps me close to my roots," she replied. "Never want to forget where I started." He understood. Everyone in this hangar understood. They remembered the younger version of her, walking in years ago, wearing a simple trainee uniform, eyes bright and filled with ambition. They remembered how she worked twice as hard, studied twice as long, arrived before sunrise, and left long after sunset. They remembered the days she stood right here, asking questions no one else bothered to ask, and now she was their captain. Amy walked toward a workstation where an open maintenance binder waited. She flipped through the pages with careful fingers, scanning each note. Turbine check, fuel valve replacement, avionics update, hydraulic test. Perfect. But she wasn't just checking the aircraft systems. She was steadying herself. Flying was the easy part. The sky never judged her. The aircraft never doubted her. It was the world down here. The assumptions, the comparisons, the whispers that she had to rise above repeatedly. As she closed the binder, her eyes drifted to a photo pinned on the corkboard nearby. A younger version of her stood beside a smaller training plane, holding her very first flight certificate. She remembered that day vividly. The wind had been strong, her hands a little shaky, but the smile was real. "Captain," a soft voice called. She turned to see a young girl, barely 19, wearing an engineering trainee badge. She looked nervous, holding a tool in one hand and a notebook in the other. "Jai, how can I help?" Amy asked, stepping closer. The trainee swallowed hard. I just wanted to say, you're the reason I joined aviation. Jab main opco paley doffa flight uniform main decka tha. I felt like maybe girls like us can also do this. For a moment, Amy felt her heart soften. Girls like us, she knew exactly what that meant. Girls from small towns, modest families, everyday homes. Girls told to choose safe careers. Girls told flying was too ambitious. Amy placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're going to become better than me," she said softly. The trainee's eyes shimmered. "Agar op jasa ban gay na, to zindagi safel ho jagi." Amy smiled. "Nahai, zindagi tab safel hogi jab tum, epni kud kai kahani lik hogi." The girl nodded, holding back tears. Just then, a loud beeping sound echoed through the hangar, the tug vehicle signaling that the aircraft was ready to be pushed back for departure. "Captain, they're calling you," the chief engineer said. Amy exhaled slowly. Time to go. She took one last look around the hangar, the place that had shaped her into who she was, a place of grease, stained hands, sleepless nights, and hard-won victories. With every step she took out of the hangar, her pink coat swayed gently, the light catching its fabric and painting a soft glow around her. The sunlight outside seemed brighter, as if the world itself was acknowledging the quiet power she carried. But as she stepped back onto the runway, something unusual caught her eye. A group of senior officials stood waiting beside her aircraft, faces serious, expressions unreadable. Amy's heartbeat quickened. This wasn't normal. Today wasn't going to be a regular flight. Something significant was about to unfold, and she had no idea how much it would change everything.